There's a silence you carry inside, not the silence of peace, but of something missing. It doesn't shout, it waits. You feel it in quiet moments, when the noise fades, when the world stops pulling, when no one's watching and you have nothing left to prove. And then you sense it, the outline of a life you never lived. Not regret, not memory, something deeper. A ghost, not of someone you lost, but of someone you could have been. It watches from the edges, not to punish you, not to haunt you, but to remind you that somewhere along the way, you traded possibility for safety, instinct for structure, desire for discipline, and something inside you, something vital, went quiet. Carl Jung called this the unlived life. The pieces of your potential you turned away from, the passions dismissed as impractical, the instincts shamed as wrong, the boldness softened into politeness, the power wrapped in pleasing. And now it stands behind you like a shadow, not evil, not bitter, just waiting to be acknowledged. Because the self you abandoned never dies, it becomes 10. Not just the parts you're ashamed of, but the parts that were too big, too bright, too wild to be accepted. You sense it in others when you admire someone's courage and feel something tighten in your chest. When you see someone speak with fire and your stomach turns. When someone lives boldly and you call them arrogant, but secretly you ache because they remind you of you, or rather, the you that could have been. And that is not cruelty. It's invitation, not from your mind, but from your soul. An invitation to turn around, to stop running, to meet the ghost, to ask, what part of me did I abandon to be accepted? The unlived life is not gone. It is waiting, patient, persistent, and the longer you ignore it, the heavier it becomes, not as guilt, but as grief. And maybe the first step toward becoming whole is to admit there is someone inside me I have never met. We hear the word shadow, and we think of something dark, something dangerous, something to be avoided or buried or fixed. But Carl Jung saw it differently. To him, the shadow wasn't evil. It was everything we refuse to be, but secretly are. Not just our flaws, but our potential. Not just the parts we fear, but the parts we need to be whole. The shadow is not your enemy, it is your unlived self. It contains the artist you silenced, the rage you swallowed, the truth you denied, the ambition you buried under good manners, the sensuality you numbed, the clarity you ignored to fit in. It holds your fire and your freedom. And here's the paradox. What we repress doesn't disappear. It gathers strength in the dark. It becomes the whisper in your dreams, the ache in your chest, the edge in your voice when you're pretending everything's fine. Jung knew that wholeness doesn't come from light alone. It comes from integration, from turning toward the parts of you you've cast out and saying, I see you. I know why you were hidden. I'm ready now. The shadow isn't there to destroy you. It's there to complete you. And the version of you that you could have been, that self isn't pure light. It's complex. It's imperfect. It's dangerous in the best possible way. It says things that others won't. It does things that are bold, even if they're not approved. It lives not for permission, but for truth. And truth always disturbs something. That's why you buried it. Not because it was wrong, but because the world taught you it was inconvenient, too much, too real. But you are not here to be comfortable. You're here to be whole. And until you meet the parts of you that scare you, you will never become the person you were meant to be. The shadow is not the opposite of light. It's the doorway to it. And the one you could have been, the voice, the power, the fire, it lives there, still waiting, still whole, still possible. There is a kind of fear we rarely speak of, not the fear of failure, not the fear of rejection, but the fear of who we could become if we stopped holding back. The fear of stepping into our full self with all its power, unpredictability, intensity, and truth. Jung understood this. He saw that many people are not ruined by their limitations, but by their refusal to step into their possibility. Because the fully lived self isn't always polite, it isn't always easy, it doesn't always obey. It speaks truths that make people uncomfortable. It breaks patterns that others depend on. It asks more from you than approval. It demands honesty, depth, a willingness to let your old self die. And that's terrifying. We build entire identities to stay safe, to be accepted, understood, predictable. But the self you could be doesn't care about being understood. It wants to be real. And real often means risk. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But privilege isn't comfort, it's challenge. It's the responsibility to look at what you've avoided, to admit, "I was born with more than I've lived," and to feel the weight of that without turning away. Because deep down, you know, there's a version of you that knows exactly what to do, knows how to live, how to speak, how to create, how to be. But stepping into that self requires a death of image, a death of approval, a death of the false calm that comes from staying small. And most people would rather live half a life than risk losing the one they built around their fear. But not you, not now. You feel it, that quiet pull toward more, that silent mirror held up by your shadow. Not to shame you, but to say, you don't have to keep hiding, you don't have to keep shrinking. You were always meant to be more than this mask. And the first step is not grand, it's not heroic, it's honest. To admit, "I am afraid of my own power," and then to walk forward anyway. Because on the other side of that fear is the self that's been waiting. You've seen them before, in a dream, in a memory, in a moment so small, you almost missed it. A version of you sharper, freer, more alive, not fantasy, not fiction, just unexpressed. You catch glimpses in the person you admire and secretly envy, in the conversation where you almost said what you meant, in the place your mind drifts to when the room goes quiet. This is not imagination, it's recognition. You're not inventing someone new, you're remembering someone buried. The person you could have been is not separate from you. They are watching from the inside, waiting for you to see them, to stop pretending you don't feel their presence, to stop calling your avoidance discipline, to stop labeling your numbness maturity. Because here's the truth. Every time you silence your instinct, every time you betray your truth, every time you choose safety over soul, they feel it. And so do you. This isn't judgment, it's echo. The self you could have been lives in the background of your life, like a shadow standing in a hallway you've never had the courage to walk down. Carl Jung believed that this possible you is not some external standard you must live up to. It's an inner potential you are called to reconcile with. Not as a goal, but as a mirror, to show you what still lives in you, even if you've turned away. And it's not too late, it never was. This other you, the bolder one, the truer one, doesn't want you to be perfect. They want you to be real, to admit the life you've designed was built on compromise, to stop asking the world who you're allowed to be, to stop postponing your becoming. Because eventually, you will meet them. Maybe in a dream, maybe in a crisis, maybe on the day everything you built collapses and there, in the ashes, they stand. Not to mock you, but to ask one simple question. Are you ready now? Some confrontations don't happen in the outer world. They happen in the mirror, in silence, in a room where no one else is watching. It's the moment you stop explaining your life, stop defending your choices, stop rehearsing the story of why it had to be this way. And in that stillness, someone stands across from you. Not a stranger, not a monster, but a version of you left behind. The you who once believed in something bigger, the you who dreamed before you measured, the you who moved from instinct, not strategy, the you who wasn't yet edited to be acceptable. This confrontation is not dramatic, it's subtle, but you feel it in your bones. Carl Jung understood this moment. He called it a moral obligation to the self, not to your job, or your image, or even your past, but to the part of you that never stopped asking, what if I had lived fully? And the pain that rises isn't punishment, it's grief. For all the paths not taken, all the words not spoken, all the rooms inside you left unexplored. This grief is not your enemy, it's the beginning of truth. Because until you face the self you abandoned, you will keep abandoning pieces of yourself in every decision you make. You'll stay in roles you've outgrown. Say yes when you mean no. Nod in agreement while something inside you screams. But when you face that buried self, when you stop looking away, something shifts. Not quickly, not easily, but deeply. You begin to remember who you were before you became who you were told to be. And slowly, you stop apologizing for wanting more. You stop pretending to be smaller than you are. You stop carrying the guilt of becoming yourself. Because the self you abandoned is not angry. They're waiting for your courage, for your presence, for your return. And when you finally look them in the eyes, you may hear the words you've been waiting for your entire life. I'm still here. There are wounds that don't bleed, that don't leave scars others can see, but they ache quietly, endlessly, not because someone betrayed you, but because you betrayed yourself. Carl Jung understood this pain, not as punishment, but as a signal that something deep within you was sacrificed, not for survival, but for acceptance. You chose the safer path, the smaller room, the version of yourself that was easier to explain. And in doing so, you left something behind. At first, you don't notice. You're praised for being agreeable, rewarded for being realistic. You learn how to function, how to succeed, how to keep the chaos quiet. But one day, you wake up and realize you've built a life around a self that wasn't fully you. And it hits you, the heaviness, the quiet ache of a soul unlived. This isn't guilt, it's not shame. It's something harder to name, a slow erosion of aliveness. You smile, but it doesn't reach your eyes. You work, but feel like a stranger in your own skin. You rest, but never feel restored. Because when you betray your deeper self, the world may applaud, but you feel the emptiness echoing inside. This is the wound Jung spoke of, the psychic split between who you are and who you could be. It's not healed with achievements, not with numbing, not with more doing. It's healed by turning inward, by sitting with the pain, by saying, yes, I left myself, but I don't have to leave myself again. Because the most radical act of healing isn't to become someone new, it's to stop abandoning who you already are. And that journey begins The moment you stop asking what the world wants from you and start asking what your soul has been whispering all along. We're taught to cut away the parts of us that don't fit. Be polite, be consistent, be clean. Keep your darkness locked up. Tuck away the rage, the desire, the fire, the wild. But Carl Jung saw the opposite. He knew that wholeness isn't purity, it's integration. It's not light or dark, it's both, held together, seen, honored. The mistake isn't having a shadow. The mistake is pretending you don't, because what you repress controls you. What you deny drives you. What you bury grows in silence, until it finds a way out, through anxiety, projection, sabotage. Integration is the work of becoming undivided. It's not becoming perfect, it's becoming real. It's standing in front of your shame and saying, "You belong." Sitting beside your fear and whispering, "You are part of this too." Letting your ambition speak without shaming it as selfish. Letting your anger rise without branding it as dangerous. Letting your desire breathe without suffocating it in guilt. This doesn't mean letting chaos run your life. It means creating a seat at the table for every part of you that has something to say. The one you could have been isn't an ideal. They're a totality, not some perfect future self, but the unfiltered you with teeth, with softness, with paradox. Integration is the moment you stop cutting parts off just to be loved. The moment you decide that you'd rather be whole than just be liked. And in that decision, you become powerful, not because you're untouchable, but because you are no longer at war with yourself. And peace, true peace, is not the absence of conflict, it's the presence of inner unity. When you walk through life as someone who has met their shadow, you stop pretending, you stop performing, you move differently, with depth, with edge, with presence. Because now, there is nothing in you that you're afraid to face. Inside each of us, something ancient lives, a set of voices, a library of instincts, stories that are older than memory, but closer than breath. Carl Jung called them archetypes, not characters we invent, but forces that shape us from within. The hero, the rebel, the lover, the creator, the seeker, the sage, the destroyer, the healer. You weren't taught them, you were born with them. They live in the collective unconscious, in symbols, in dreams, in the moments when you act without explanation and feel completely yourself. But here's the tragedy. We're taught to silence most of them. We learn early that the warrior is too aggressive, that the lover is too much, that the artist is unrealistic, that the rebel is dangerous, that the healer is naive, that the seeker is unstable. And so, we choose one mask, one archetype we think is safe. We build a life around it. We get good at it. We perform it. And in doing so, we exile the rest. But they don't go away. They become the voice in your dreams, the itch in your chest, the tension between who you are and who you secretly know you could be. And that unlived life, it's not abstract. It's full of forgotten archetypes, dormant, not dead. Jung believed that true individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires you to reclaim them, to let the creator paint again, to let the warrior speak up, to let the lover feel, to let the sage guide, to let the rebel disobey when something inside you says no. Because each of these forces is a part of your design, and silencing them isn't maturity, it's self-erasure. The person you could have been is not one archetype fully expressed, It is all of them, in balance, in dialogue, in presence. That doesn't make life easier. It makes life real. You stop living a role and start living a soul. And when that happens, you don't just feel more alive, you feel more true. Because you are no longer a copy, you are an original, not made, but remembered. There's a price for every path not taken, not always in pain, sometimes in numbness, in boredom that doesn't make sense, in a quiet grief you can't name. Because the truth is, you feel the cost of not becoming yourself, even if no one else does. You can have the job, the relationship, the structure, the respect. But if it was built on avoidance, on fear, on compromise, on staying small so you wouldn't be rejected, then something in you always knows. It shows up in moments when life goes quiet, when you're alone and not distracted, when the image fades and all that's left is you. And in that moment, you hear it, a soft, almost unbearable question. Is this it? Jung believed that the greatest tragedy is not in what happens to us, but in what we refuse to become. We trade authenticity for acceptance, soul for safety, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, we fall asleep inside our own life. The world may never notice. In fact, it may reward you for it, for fitting in, for being reliable, for not disturbing the peace. But inside you feel it, a slow erosion of self, a fading pulse, a quiet ache that says, you left something behind. And the longer you ignore it, the heavier it gets. Because the unlived life doesn't disappear. It waits, not as punishment, but as reminder that you were made for more than maintenance, that your soul didn't come here to be efficient, it came here to become. And the cost of not becoming yourself isn't just a dull life, it's regret. Not for what you did, but for what you never allowed yourself to try. But there's another truth. It's not too late. The moment you stop pretending, the moment you stop blaming the world for the life you quietly chose, you reclaim your power. You can still turn toward what was buried. You can still meet the self that waited. And the cost of not becoming yourself can become the beginning of finally doing so. You think it's over. You think you missed your chance. Too much time has passed. Too many choices made. Too many masks worn for too long. But what if that's not true? What if the self you were meant to become never left? What if they've been waiting quietly, patiently, not in the past, but just beneath the surface of the present? Carl Jung knew this. The psyche doesn't forget. The self, the real you, doesn't die. It waits. It waits through your distractions, through your performances, through your pleasing and your planning and your pretending. It waits beneath your overthinking, beneath your self-doubt, beneath the fear that you're too late. And then, one day, when the noise falls away, you hear them. The one who waited, not to judge you, not to shame you, but to welcome you back. Back to your instincts, back to your boldness, back to your strange, beautiful, complicated, wild soul. Because here's the truth. You were never abandoned. You were the one who left. And now, you've returned. Maybe not as the person you were expected to be, but as someone braver. Someone who carries the weight of choices made and still chooses to begin again. The one you could have been was never somewhere out there. They were always in here. Not waiting for you to be perfect. Not waiting for the right moment. Just waiting for your presence. Waiting for the day you'd look in the mirror past the persona, past the projection, past the protective shell and say, I remember you, and I'm ready now. Because becoming yourself is not a destination, it's a return. And no matter how far you've wandered, the path back has always been there, waiting in the dark, silent, steady, unmoving, like the one you were always meant to be.